Hey guys, it is such a nice day today. It's probably because it's a holiday, it's Easter, and the gym hasn't been open until right now, and that's why I'm out in the sun. But enough about that, let's get into it. So today we are going to talk a little bit about being honest about what you actually know and fighting that urge you will have, or rather some people have, deep down inside that makes you want to... You want to convince people that you know more than you do because you're insecure in yourself. At least that's what I think it is. It could be a different reason, but let's just kind of elaborate a little bit on this. You see, something that happened not that long ago was that I made a video where I tried to kind of explain this idea that some people may get into their heads, that just because you watched a bunch of YouTube videos and maybe you've done a boot camp or two, that you're now ready to join the ranks of the front-end developers and become a full-time programmer. Now in this video I make the claim that this is not so, and I make that claim with a fair amount of, let's call it, force. You have to excuse me, guys. Just like anybody else, sometimes I have certain subjects that I care more about and some subjects I don't care so much about. And when I made said video, I had yet another discussion with somebody who keeps on telling me, or rather, let's just say that there was a little bit of a heated discussion going on there, because it's very frustrating for you. You kind of have to understand me. I hope that you can understand where I'm coming from with this, because when you have this issue where people have, because this is the root cause of it all, that you're just not, either you don't know better or you're simply not okay with simply being who you are. That's at least how it seems for me, because there's so many people out there who will desperately try to convince me and others and people around them that they know a lot of stuff that they don't actually know all that well. And they only do so because they're not comfortable in being who they are, or that they're not comfortable in their own skill set. It's insecurities at the end of the day. I mean, I do it, I used to do it too, and sometimes I forget myself and I still do it, but I try to correct it as much as possible, because it has to be okay to not know absolutely everything. So in this video I tell you that, I tell you a little bit of a story where I interviewed for my previous job, I interviewed a so-called senior front-end developer. Now this person had, per my definition, a very, very poor understanding of JavaScript as a language. Now, what then happens is that a subscriber of mine, we kind of get into a little bit of an argument. And this argument I usually only have with people who call themselves front-end developers, but per my definition are web designers. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that there's a group of designers out there in the world who focus primarily on UX design, that sort of thing. They come in from the design angle, and then they learn CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, and then they get it into their heads that they know what I do. That is absolutely incorrect. It is 100% incorrect, because it's very easy to check whether or not somebody is a front-end developer. If you want to check if somebody is a front-end developer, ask them to spin up to create a server with a user-facing interface, a database, and all of that good stuff. Now, some of you are going to tell me, oh, well, that's a full-stack developer. Well, yeah, technically, but how in the world can you have a front-end without a server? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you are only on the interface, if the only thing you know is how to make the interface, then you are not a developer, per my definition. You are not a system programmer, or whatever you want to call it. Anywho, what's interesting was that we kind of got into this argument, right? And the argument that kind of arose started by, well, this other person was saying to me virtually that, well, there's probably a million questions that I could ask you, Fredrik, that you can't answer, and being dismissive to people but just because they're not experts in JavaScript is a little bit yada yada, and so forth and so forth. And I told them, like, I agree. There are so many questions that you could ask me about programming, and not just you could ask me about JavaScript, which is like one of my strongest languages, and I would not be able to answer you. And then he made the argument that, well, you know, this person that you dismissed for this job interview, maybe they were really good at design and the other aspects of front-end development. And I said, that's correct. It could have been the case that this person was extremely good at other things, but the company was not interested in a CSS or Sass ninja. They were interested in somebody who was really good with JavaScript because the application is built on React. There's a server, therefore you need to know how the server client interaction works. That's why I keep telling people that you cannot just learn JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, then call yourself a developer, because you do not have, unless you understand how a server works, unless you understand how data gets to your user, you cannot build an application. It's that simple. That's why I keep telling people that this term front-end developer, full-stack developer, like all of this ambiguity, like there's no such thing in my universe as a front-end developer who doesn't understand how the server works. Now, what I argue happens, because this person I got the sensation, I don't know why, but there was a lot of, he seemed to be very defensive and a little bit upset. And I think that has to do with the fact that he's suffering from this phenomenon that I'm telling you about. I think that the way that this person defines this person defined himself was something that I intruded on. I stepped on that sensation of personality. And what was beautiful was that just the other day, this other person contacted me asking about, in response to a video that I made, which was more about, all right, how long does it take to learn coding and so forth. And so he asked me, he said that this was a very great video, and he was very happy that I kind of explained that it takes a while to become like a real programmer. And so he asked, does the same thing apply for CSS and HTML? And so I wrote back to this viewer, and I said, well, it kind of depends on what you mean, because what I'm trying to relate to you guys is that you can learn software, or code, if you will, in a matter of days or weeks. You can absolutely learn CSS and HTML and so forth also in a matter of days or weeks, depending on how much time you want to spend on it. But you have to understand that there's a difference between knowing some basics and knowing something that people are going to pay you to do. It's the same thing for anything. I mean, I took the example, like I know how to use Sketch, for example, and I know how to do some basic artboards and designs. Does that make me a designer? No. It makes me an enthusiast, a hobby designer, call it whatever you want. But I will never get paid a professional wage for such a thing. And I explained that to the subscriber, and he said, oh, great, thanks. Because most of the time I spend my time in Photoshop and Sketch and so forth. So I thought that, all right, then I'll learn some basics, HTML and CSS, as I go along. Beautiful. That reply made me so happy. It was like this person he was not defensive. He understood that he was a designer, not a programmer. And there was no argument, because this person was secure enough to understand that my expertise lies in Photoshop, Sketch, that sort of thing. I don't have this need to justify myself to Frederick and try to convince him that I'm good at what I do. And that's beautiful, because I'm not trying to attack him. I'm trying to simply explain to him my perspective of things. The same thing goes for me. Like, no, you will never hear me if somebody asks me, oh, are you a designer? You will never hear me say, well, I know, because that's what people do. People who are insecure will start to try to sorta know the thing that they're talking about. I've seen it a million times. I will ask someone outright, are you, do you know, my favorite one is, do you know, say, React, for example. And this happens because it's such a popular brand. I asked them, do you know React? And they kind of go, well, I dabble a little bit in React. And they kind of, because the thing is, like dabble. What does dabble mean? Does that mean that you do it professionally full time, or does it mean that you took a tutorial? Which is it? You see, people seem to have this desire to sell the idea that they are experts in everything, or at least competent in everything, because they know that the person asking the question, their perceived value of you is associated to what you're going to say. We live in this world where saying that you don't know or not knowing something is associated with you basically being dumb, or rather that's what it looks like. And that's where I kind of have to, this is what I try to do. I try to explain to people that I am enthusiastic about a lot of things, and there are a lot of things that I find interesting, but there's not that many, but there's just a few of these things that I actually know really well. Like, the list of stuff that I suck at is enormous. Tons of languages, like if you go to my CV and you look at all the languages and tools and so forth that I have there, some of them I'm really good at, and some of them I've only used a little bit. Like take C and C++. That's on my CV. Do you know the last time I used C and C++ professionally? Never. The only reason it's there is because I studied it for a year roughly as a part of a computer science degree that I was taking. That was it. That's all the reason it is there. And you see, that's not the how to put it, but if someone asks me, do you know C and C++? I will tell them that, well, no, not really. I can write code in it, but I would have to kind of look up a lot of things. I'm pretty sure I could make it work, but I'm really not an expert. And that's okay. That's okay, guys. You don't have to be an expert at absolutely everything. So when somebody asks you, like, fight that urge to try to convince the world that you know absolutely everything, and just be honest about it. There's no shame. Just say what you like. Be honest. Because there are so many issues that come from this need people have to try to convince everybody else that they know everything. I mean, I just don't. I just wish that we could kind of get away from this. I'm sorry. I'm going on here, but I mean, the same thing goes for me when I get contacted by tons of people. Most of the time, recruiters contact me about languages that I'm really good at, and I tell them, yeah, I know this stuff fairly well. And just once in a while, they will contact me about some obscure language and say, hey, we're looking for a senior developer in this and this. And I say, well, that's not really me, because I've only been using this language a little bit, and I'm still learning it. And then they say, oh, that's okay. We're just trying to find people. So that, have some familiarity with it. It's something that, like, for example, it wasn't all that long ago I saw people looking for senior Node.js developers, and I kind of went, there's no one there. There's no one who's a senior in Node.js. The same thing with Rust. There's no senior Rust developer. There might be a senior who's been working in some other language for a few years, but nobody's worked with that language for long enough to be considered a senior in comparison. I mean, if you have a Java senior or C# senior, there we're talking about somebody who most likely has been using that language for over 10 years. I mean, do you see the difference? So what I want you to take away from this is that you have to try your best to just be okay with not knowing everything. Be honest about the things you know. And if somebody asks you about something that you are a little bit familiar with, just be honest and say that as well. Like, yeah, no, I'm not the expert at this, but I play around with it a little bit or something like that. Don't try to pretend that you know things that you don't know, because it's just going to, it's just better for you. Trust me. Have a great day.